Well, Houston, we have a problem. The other day we blew out a spark plug. This car has alloy heads and the thread is all stripped. I rang up a thread repair guy and he told me that I'll have to take out the brake booster and the exhaust manifold for him to try and get it. I've already taken out the brake booster, so I'll show you what I've done. I've got my rags on and unfortunately doing a job I particularly don't want to do. The spark plug that's blown out, or the hole, is the one just there, and it faces to the rear of the car on an angle. So I'll remove the brake booster. Now what you do is take off, I put a container underneath the fluid container on the master cylinder and pulled that off, caught that. Then I undid the brake hoses, undid the line for the booster off the engine, and then you go around inside the car. Take off the panel here, get up in there, and you take the pin out of the brake pedal which goes on the end of your booster, and up on the firewall there's 4 bolts, and you undo them and then you pull out the whole unit. Well, I can honestly say this is an absolute bastard. I fought to undo the bolts down there on the flange on the manifold. Right up the top you can't get at them, but I got them. I managed to undo the manifold bolts, but there's one problem. I can't get it out because the shock absorber here for the engine shock is in the way. I've undone the power steering lines so I can push them out of the way. Well, they're out now. So I can try and get this thing back far enough to get it off the studs. This stud here is a nightmare. I'm going to put 2 nuts on it and try to disconnect the stud. Well, after a long hard struggle I managed to remove the exhaust manifold. The biggest problem was this engine shock here. I couldn't get it out. It refuses to budge, and but I managed to get the heat shield off it. I noticed we have a couple of little oil leak at the back here on the rocker cover gasket, so I'm going to change that. The thread repair man can't come for a couple of days, so it's going to be off the road for a couple of days. Rightio, we've got Greg the thread man, and he reckons he could fix it in the space he's got. Right, Greg's got a bit of cutting compound and a tap and is now tapping the thread. We're just running the standard tap at present.
Oh no, this is
now we're stepping
it. It's stepped up already.
Okay, we're stepping up the tap size.
It's a pilot nose. It starts at the 14 thread and steps up to insert size.
There you go. That's a
pilot nose tap.
Pilot nose tap 14 insert.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
More or less, yeah. Pull path up through the coil, which fills with carbon, and sooner or later you remove a plug and then the coil will start to follow. It might come all the way out, or it might just poke a leg out of the hole, but it will cause you problems. I use what's called a time cert. It's a solid insert that's locked into place. You don't end up with the same issues, and with routine maintenance it'll last you the life of the head.
Yeah, I was thinking about that with when you pull the plug out, the heli coil or whatever's going to go with it. Yeah.
It quite often does, and even if it only moves a little bit, if it sticks even half a turn out of the thread and you don't notice, it might wind back together well, and you'll tighten the plug and you'll clamp the end of the coil across the face, across the washer surface, and it'll make an indent there that's, you know, then going to be there forever. That can cause a lot of issues.
So we're using the good stuff, that's good.
Yeah, the time certs are the way to go with these things. Any spark plug repair.
Excellent. That's a little, what do you call that thing?
That's the tap that I've...
Oh, that's the tap, and you just run it in.
I've run a cutter, which I've got
With
here.
the cutter. Oh, right. Over the top of the tap.
Just needs one more little touch.
Oh.
Just to
Very
finish dressing that seat. And if you have a look at it, if that's the surface of the metal, and I've cut a thread here, it's cut a little square recess for the top of the insert. It's got a little lip on it. That sits into it, so it can't wind down through and into the cylinder. And then you put it together, the last thread on the inside's not formed. You put it in with a fluteless tap that jams against this, forces it down so this sits home, and then flares the bottom. So it won't come back out again either.
And that's made of bronze or something?
No, that's just got a copperised coating on it so that you don't get, you know, corrosion or anything. It's
right.
high tensile steel.
Yeah, wow. Right, the man came and went. His total time here was 45 minutes, most of it chatting with me. And we look down in there, you can see he's put a new thread and everything in there. What I've got to do now is I'm going to crank the engine over just to blow any bits of filings or anything out the hole. And that's it, and I'll start putting the car together. So what I'm going to do now is put that spark plug in first, because it's easier putting it in now than later, even when the manifold's on, exhaust manifold. I've hung the exhaust manifold gaskets on a stud, ready to put the exhaust manifold back on, except for one stud which is out, which I'll put on once I get the manifold started. Well, I've loosely got the manifold in position. The awkward part about it is lining up the flange to go on the exhaust pipe underneath it, and now I'm going to try and get under the car and join that flange up, boring as it may be. Well, you have to be a contortionist to tighten up these bolts and things. As you can see, they're near impossible to get at. But I managed to tighten them all up and pull up the flange down the bottom. Next thing I'm going to do is panel beat the heat shield that goes over this engine shocker, because I had to rip it out and to get it out, to get the manifold out. So I'm doing that next. Little engine shocker is back on with the heat shield back in place, and now I'm going to reconnect the power steering lines, which is this one here and another one up here there. I have to go back under the car, join the pipes onto the steering box loosely and connect them up here. Well, I've got the power steering pipes are back on. Now I'm just going to plug the spark plug leads in while I can get them. They're very hard to get at once the power booster and the master cylinder is back in the car. Right, we're ready to put the power booster with the master cylinder attached back in the car. This part down here lines up with the brake pedal, and it has a bush and a bolt go through it. So I'm going to put that through that hole down there and hopefully line it up and put a bolt in it. Right, we're under the dash, and up in there I've just put a bush in to hold the brake pedal in place, and now I'm going to put the bolt in, and then I'll push it in hard and put the 4 nuts around the edges that hold the booster in place. Right, the booster's in. Now I'm going to reconnect the brake lines, put the booster pipe back on, the vacuum pipe, and put the reserve tank for the brake fluid on. Well, everything's pretty well back together now, except for the radiator water bottle, which I'm leaving off for a minute. I'm going to run the engine, check the manifold for leaks, and run the power steering. I've got the car jacked up, and what you do is fill up your reservoir over there and turn the wheel backwards and forwards to get the aerator line. And later on I'll bleed the brakes, which I won't bore you with. Well, after a lot of drama, I finally got the car back together again. You have minor problems like leaking pipes off the power steering box, and then later on you pump like hell on the brakes to bleed them out. So not much fun, and like I said, you have to be a contortionist to get into positions and try and get your hands into positions. But anyway, I succeeded.